At the end of Canto 2, the sages of Naimisharanya asked Suta Goswami, their speaker, could you speak about the conversation that happened between Vidura and Maitreya? Because Suta Goswami was about to speak on the topic of Padma Kalpa. However, the sages thought they would be more interested to hear about Vidura and Maitreya. So Suta Goswami said, actually, Shukadev Goswami and Maharaj Parikshit also spoke about Vidura and Maitreya. So I will recount their conversation to you, all of you. So and then he begins in the Canto 3 to describe what was the conversation that happened between Shukadeva Goswami and Parikshit Maharaj regarding Vidura and Maitreya. So Shukadeva Goswami in the chapter 1 began to explain what led Vidura to meet a sage like Maitreya. Because Vidura was living in Hastinapur in the palace of Dhritarashtra and Duryodhana. So how could he meet a sage like Maitreya, who generally lives in Himalayas or in other holy places? So Shukadeva Goswami began with explaining how Vidura left home for a pilgrimage. And what was the reason? The reason was he was disrespected by Duryodhana, who was his nephew, and it was not just a disrespect, and it was really beyond the etiquette. So he decided it is time for him to quit the service of the Kurus, which he has done so faithfully for a very long time. So he thought it is Krishna's indication that he takes to the life of a renunciant. So he leaves home, takes to a pilgrimage. In the course of the pilgrimage, Vidura comes to know at a place called Prabhasha Kshetra that Krishna and all the other Yadus had left the planet. Hearing that, he was very mortified. So he continues his travel and comes to Yamuna. So he hears this news on the banks of river Saraswati, but he travels to the banks of river Yamuna, and there he meets Uddhava. And after meeting Uddhava, Vidura was very happy because Uddhava is also a Yadu and he is still alive. And he asks Uddhava, how is Krishna? How are the various Yadus? So the whole first chapter is he's naming so many Yadus like Ugrasena, Baladev, Pradyumna, Samba, Devaki, Vasudev, and asking how are they doing? Jiva Goswami says, even though he clearly heard that all of them had left the planet, still he was asking this question, not because he wasn't intelligent. Rather, Jiva Goswami says, he was thinking maybe it was a rumor, maybe it was wrong, maybe it was a like an untruth. So maybe Krishna is still alive. So it was a more of an emotional response, especially on seeing Uddhava. So Uddhava, on hearing this, becomes more absorbed in Krishna, remembers Krishna, and recounts to Vidura that how Krishna had disappeared from the world. And then he also explains various who is Krishna really. He gives a philosophical understanding and to pacify Vidura. And then he also, after giving the philosophy, he also recounts the pastimes of Krishna from his birth and then the pastimes of Vrindavan. So this is where chapter 2 ends. In chapter 3, Uddhava continues Krishna's pastimes in Mathura and Dwarka. So after remembering all of those past tense, he explains how did the Yadus disappear? What was the reason and the uh, external way that they disappeared? He recounts that, and then this is where we saw last week the chapter 4. So that is how he begins the chapter 4 after explaining how the Yadus got cursed and then how they disappeared. And then Vidura wants to know more about what Krishna spoke to Uddhava when he was about to leave the planet. So Uddhava was told by Krishna in Dwarka that you go to Badrikashram, knowing that the Yadus are all going to disappear, and he wanted Uddhava to carry out this mission. Uddhava understood the heart of Krishna that he is going to disappear. So he did not go to Badrikashram, rather, he followed Krishna and the other Yadus who were going to Prabhasa Kshetra. And after all of them disappear, Uddhava reaches there and sees Krishna sitting and cries and then explains how he cannot tolerate his separation. So Krishna, to pacify him, gives him more knowledge. At that time, Maitreya Rishi is also present along with Uddhava, hearing Krishna. So after explaining, he instructs Uddhava to go to Badrikashram, and then Krishna disappears. Uddhava leaves the place and then is currently he is in Yamuna's banks. That's where Vidura is meeting. But Maitreya Rishi, from after hearing Krishna, had left to the banks of Ganges. So he is on the banks of Ganga at Haridwar. So when Vidura asked, would you like to explain those instructions that Krishna gave to you just before leaving this planet? Uddhava, understanding that Vidura is an elder and he is as good as his age of his father, so he did not want to become his spiritual master by instructing him. So in the last two chapters also, he spoke a lot of things too about Krishna to Vidura, but that was more of a discussion, a sharing of one's heart, and in general about Krishna's pastimes. But here, Vidura very clearly asks in the mood of submissive inquiry. So Uddhava feels, I have a mission to go to Badrikashram, so I don't want to delay it because I am feeling intense separation from Krishna. By executing his instructions, I will mitigate that separation. So I want to go to Badrikashram immediately. So it would be better, Vidura, if you can go and meet Maitreya Rishi, because he was also there along with me, hearing everything that Krishna spoke. And he is a great soul. So he is on the banks of the Ganges. Please go and meet him. And in this way, they spend the night, and then Uddhava leaves to Badrikashram, and Vidura leaves to the banks of Ganges to meet Maitreya Rishi. So this is where we stopped the last week, that Vidura and Maitreya had just met. So in chapter 5, we are going to actually begin the conversation between Vidura and Maitreya. So please come, let's see what happens in the chapter 5 of Canto 3, which is the technical section called as Sarga. So out of the 10 topics that are explained in Srimad Bhagavatam, Shukadeva Goswami explained in Canto 2, there are 10 topics. The first of those topics is called as Sarga, which is creation of the universe. And predominantly, some aspects of creation, the process of creation, is explained in Canto 3, and also some aspects of secondary creation are also explained in Canto 3. If you all remember, we already saw the process of creation in Canto 2 already. But still, in this chapter, we will again see with a little more extra details. So that is what we are going to see today, the process of creation predominantly. So I already gave this recap for the first four chapters, how Shukadeva Goswami narrated the events leading up to the meeting of Vidura and Maitreya, and how Vidura leaves home, meets Uddhava, and Uddhava speaks about Krishna. And then Uddhava recommends Vidura to meet Maitreya. So here Vidura has reached the banks of Ganges near Haridwar and is finally submitting himself at the lotus feet of Maitreya. So there is also a very interesting connection between Maitreya and Vidura. So we all know how Vidura is in one sense a son of Vyasadeva because Vyasadeva impregnated Vidura in the womb of a maidservant. So in one sense, he is the father of Vidura, and Maitreya Rishi is one of the very closest friends of Vyasadeva. So here, Vidura is meeting one of the closest friends of his father. So Maitreya Rishi is like a fatherly figure for Vidura. So he is going and submitting at his lotus feet on the banks of Ganges, and he is going to inquire from Maitreya Rishi. So let us see what is Vidura inquiring from Maitreya Rishi at the outset. So the chapter 5 contains verses, a total of 51 verses, and the first 9 verses are the questions by Vidura to Maitreya Rishi, and the next 6 verses, 7 verses, Vidura is going to glorify and emphasize his interest in Krishna Katha. And in the next 6 verses, Maitreya Rishi expresses his gratitude to Vidura and explains the process of creation uh, from verses 22 to verses 51, where a predominant section of the prayers offered by the elemental demigods also come as part of the creation. So that is the extra piece of information that is revealed here than in Canto 2. So let's go quickly through the questions. So as I said, Vidura met Maitreya at Haridwar and he inquired from him various questions. So we are going to see those. So at this point, since we are just going to begin the chapter 5, would anybody like to ask anything or add anything at this point? Someone has a question about the previous chapters? So let us, the first very question that Vidura asked is a very famous verse. Sukhaya karmani karoti loko natai sukham vanyaduparamva vindeta bhuyas tatayeva dukkham yadatra yuktam bhagavangadenaha. So this is one of very famous verses which explains uh, how in this world so many people want to be happy, but they are not. So how can they be happy? So in essence, the question by Vidura is, how can everyone in this world be happy? Like we also have this famous like uh, Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. So something very similar theme here Vidura is asking. Everyone in this world is engaged in various activities to become happy, but they are not able to become happy. Rather, they are only experiencing distress. So, how can we avoid this? So, please explain. So, this is his first question. In essence, how to become happy. Not personally, he is asking for other living entities. And very interestingly, he asks this question and then he himself answers this question in one sense. So the other verse, I haven't put it up here, but it's also a famous verse. Janasya Krishnat Vimukasya Daiva Adharmashilasya Sudukhitasya Anugrahai Hacharanti Nunam Bhutan Bhavyani Janardhanisya. So he says that great philanthropic souls like you actually travel this world on behalf of the Supreme Lord. to show compassion. To whom? To those living entities who are actually suffering. And why are they suffering? Vidura says the living entities are suffering not because God is cruel, not because God is evil, or God put evil in this world. He is very nicely, concisely saying what is the reason for suffering in this world. He is saying, Janasya Krishna Vimukasya Daiva Adharma Shilasya Sudukhitasya. Why are they Dukhitasya? Why are they miserable? Because they are Adharma Shila. Because they are followers of irreligion. Their behavior, Shila, their character is irreligious. And why are they irreligious or how are they irreligious? Because they are Krishna Vimukasya. Because they are Vimukha means they have turned their backs to Krishna. So that is irreligion because we know in the Srimad Bhagavatam religion is described as Savai Pumsam Paro Dharma Yato Bhakti Adokshade means the highest religion is service to Krishna. So when people turn their backs to Krishna, turn away from Krishna, or give up their service to Krishna, or become atheistic, then they are considered irreligious. And he very, in a sutra format, he reveals that if one wants to be happy in this world, then he has to be following dharma. The highest dharma is service to Krishna. So in any way, a person gives up dharma, he cannot be happy. In a short time, the money one accrues, maybe in an adharmic, very irreligious way, may feel like is giving happiness, but eventually, in this life or in the next life, leads to a lot of sinful reactions. So, and that is why he is saying, because people are atheistic and irreligious, that is why they are suffering. But great people like you go around out of compassion and speak about Krishna, make them Krishna conscious. So, make me also Krishna conscious. Please instruct me on devotional service. Because if I become a devotee, this is Vidura's humility. If I become a devotee, then I will also be happy. Indirectly, he is saying all the living entities in this world will become happy, specifically the human beings will become happy if they become Krishna conscious, if they become engaged in devotional service. So please instruct us on devotional service. And what is the first topic? This is a generic question, a move. The specific question he starts asking is, please explain how the Supreme Lord create and maintain this material existence. This is one of his first questions. And then he says, how does Karanodakshayi Vishnu? Karanodakshayi Vishnu is the Mahavishnu who is lying on the causal ocean. So how does he sleep in the Viraja river, which is the causal ocean? And how the one Lord expand into many forms during the time of creation? And also describe the Lord's various pastimes. So he also not just he creates this universe, but he also performs various pastimes. So I explain those. And how does the Lord create different planets along with their rulers, where living entities are situated in different modes? So essentially, these questions are like one is Sarga, one is about Leela avatars, one is pretty much about Visarga, I would say a little bit. And then he says, how does the Lord as Brahma create the natures, activities, forms, features, and names of the different living creatures? So this is specifically called as secondary creation. So in these 5 verses, he asked, please explain about creation and maintenance, and explain about Leela avatars, explain about Sarga, primary creation, how Sri Karana Vishnu creates, and then how does Brahma create? That is called as secondary creation. So Sarga is primary creation, where the overall structure of the universe gets created. Visarga means the secondary creation is populating that structure. So first building it, and then populating it. So building is done by Vishnu, Karanodakshaya Vishnu, Garbhodakshaya Vishnu, like that. But filling in the universe is done by Brahmaji. So that is why he is considered the creator of the universe, because he is the secondary creator of the universe. So these are the two topics we will be discussing. One is Sarga, primary creation. The other is Visarga, the secondary creation. So these two things we will be seeing specifically in Canto 3 in the next coming up chapters. Specifically in this chapter, Maitreya will only begin to explain creation, Sarga. Visarga will come in the future chapters. So I hope it is clear until now. Does anyone have any questions at this point?
Gautam Prabhu.
Yes, Prabhu. Balakrishna Prabhu, Hare Krishna.
Krishna, Dandavat.
Then-
In the beginning, Maitreya says he wants to hear about devotional service, but right after that, he's asking about creation.
Yeah,
Seems quite different.
different. Okay. So Vidura actually, Vishwanath Thakur writes, what is the reason that Vidura is asking questions about creation first? He could have directly asked about Krishna's pastimes. He could have directly asked, oh, dear Maitreya Rishi, Uddhava told me that Krishna spoke to you just before leaving the planet. What did he tell? He could have asked that question very straight, because that's what he asked Uddhava. He didn't ask Uddhava how was the creation done. He asked, what did Krishna say, instruct you before leaving this planet? He could have directly asked, but he was very sensitive, and the reason is we didn't see so much in detail in the previous chapter. In the recap, while explaining the previous chapters, I mentioned how Maitreya Rishi, at that point of time, while meeting Krishna and Uddhava, was predominantly a devotee, but had some tinge of jnana, that is knowledge. So little mixture of jnana was there. So Uddhava very clearly tells Vidura that Krishna was focused on Uddhava, but Maitreya Rishi was focused on Krishna while speaking. So Krishna was specifically speaking to Uddhava, and all his emotions, all his attention was completely on Uddhava and pacifying him and in instructing him. But he also saw Maitreya is there, so he didn't like ignore him, but the most attention was given to Uddhava. But Maitreya Rishi was super attentive to Krishna, and he stayed at a little distance because, yeah, he was not as close as Uddhava. And in this process of hearing from Krishna and seeing Krishna's interaction with Uddhava, how loving it is, how Krishna deals with his most surrendered devotees. Seeing that, Maitreya Rishi's affection and attraction to Krishna and to give up that little tinge of jnana is evoked. That by seeing that interaction, that is why Krishna is showing that intimate association with Uddhava. He is revealing it to Maitreya. The same concept Krishna used to change the hearts of the four Kumaras also. Even though the whole cursing of the four Kumaras concept is the pastime has a lot of angles. One angle is Krishna showed, Lord Narayan showed the four Kumaras how does he lovingly deal with his associates, what kind of a personal relationship he has with his associates, which is very deep, intimate, and beyond formalities. So that also created an impression on the hearts of the four Kumaras to become attracted towards Krishna towards the personal form of the Lord. Similarly, Maitreya Rishi at that point was not fully a pure devotee, in the sense, not like Uddhava, but he had some tinge of jnana. So that is why Vishwanath Thakur writes that Vidura, out of his natural humility did not inquire from Maitreya directly about the Lord's instructions, forms, pastimes, but he indirectly asked about things which are relevant to common people, and he thought Maitreya, in the course of explaining, will naturally speak those higher topics which Krishna explained to him. He was expecting Maitreya to come to those topics gradually, but initially he didn't want to jump in and put Maitreya into unease because I already heard from Uddhava, he told that you were there. So he didn't want to tell all those things and then feel that Krishna was more attentive to Uddhava than Maitreya. He didn't want to reveal those details. He just thought, okay, let me first ask a generic question, and from there, gradually, if he reveals or in the course of conversation, I'll ask more. That's what was his attitude. And he also wanted to benefit normal people. That is why he asked, began the topic. Identity, instead of thinking himself a very advanced soul, I am ready to hear directly about Krishna's pastimes. He identified himself as a very fallen soul and wanting to know the basic things also. Does that answer your question, Balakrishna Prabhu?
Yes, yes. Thank you very much.
So, in this section, Vidura exclusively shows his interest in hearing Krishna Katha because Vidura had heard from Vyasadeva about Mahabharata, but he wasn't satisfied because there is some Krishna Katha, but it is a lot of other things are there. So he is telling to Maitreya Rishi, I have heard my Mahabharata and all kinds of things. I am now interested to straight hear about Krishna, just things which are related directly to Krishna. And he says, Maitreya may say, oh, you have heard a lot about Krishna. He says, no, I might have heard, but who in this world can say, I'm satisfied, I'm satiated, I can't hear any more about Krishna, I'm done. It's enough. If a person really has a transcendental taste, and if he has really heard about Krishna, then he will never say that. So that is why Vidura says this very famous verse, Kastrupnuyati tapado vidana satreshu vasuri viridyamana yakarnanadin purushasya yato bhava pradam haratim sumati. So this verse is very beautiful. It says, who in this world who is intelligent will say that Tripniyat, I am satisfied by hearing about Krishna. I don't want to hear any more about Krishna. Who will say that? Because what is the effect of hearing Krishna Katha? Ya karnanadim purushasya yato. This particular medicine which enters the ears, but it actually works on the heart. Generally, for a heart disease, it's not that I put my medicine on my ears. Generally, that is not the case. Although we may take all our medicines orally, whatever problem maybe in that medicine is supposed to address in the body, we may take orally. But we don't take through ears any medicine except for the ears generally. So specifically for a heart disease, no one puts a medicine on the ears. But here, this heart disease of material bondage, material attachment, which is the disease of the heart, which gives material bondage, which keeps material life, which keeps presenting that gift of repeated birth and cycle, birth and death, life after life. That attachment is the result of life after life, birth and death, that unending cycle. That is the gift offered by material attachment, which is a disease of the heart. And that disease of the heart is cured by taking a medicine through the ears. And that medicine is about hearing Krishna Katha, hearing about Krishna. So he says, which intelligent person who understands how great a medicine Krishna Katha is will say, I am satisfied? Nobody will. Because if he still has attachment, he needs to take. If all his attachment has gone, then his only attachment is to Krishna. So either way, a person who's yet to awaken taste cannot say, I don't want to hear, because then he will only get the gift of repeated birth and death. If a person has purified his heart, he has nothing else to hear other than Krishna. So either way, nobody can say, I am satisfied about hearing about Krishna, and or I am done hearing about Krishna. So that is why, please, Maitreya Rishi, continue to speak about Krishna. And he says, pitiable are those who have no attraction to Krishna Katha. There is a lot, just these 5, 6 verses I can speak for more time, but we just will go into the core topics because this is an overview session. It's very funny, this 14th verse, Krishna Chakravarti writes a nice purport. There, Vidura says, those people who have no attachment to Krishna Katha, they are pitied by even the pitiable people. What do you mean by that? Krishna Chakravarti explains. Those people who don't have attraction to Krishna are generally materialistic people. They are pitied by even pitiable people. Who are those pitiable people? They are impersonalists, Mayavadis. Even they think materialistic people are bad. Material attachment is bad. Attachment to this world is illusion. Even they condemn those people who are themselves actually condemned. He says one who has attachment to Krishna Katha actually considers both of them, both the materialist and the impersonalist Mayavadis, both are considered pitiable by a person who has attraction to Krishna Katha. And that is why he is saying Krishna Katha is the essence of all topics. So please speak about that. Tadasya kausha rava sharma dhatur hare katha yeva katha susaram. So hare katham yeva katha susaram. Hare katha means Hari katha, Krishna's past katha. Eva only is Kathasusaram. The only essence of all topics is about topics of Krishna. Udritya Pushpeva Yivarthabandho Shivaya Kirtayadhirtakirte. Please speak about that Kathasusaram, the essence of all topics about Krishna. Please speak that. So then Maitreya Rishi can say, what do I speak first? You asked so many questions. So he might be thinking that, he might be thinking to decide what to speak first. So Vidura himself asks, please describe the activities of Purushavataras first. Purushavataras activities is actually creation and maintenance of this universe. So please speak about the creation of this universe, which is Sarga. Please speak about that first. So in this way, they enter the topic. So now Maitreya Rishi is beginning to answer Vidura, and he's not just getting into the topic. This is a great attitude and custom culture we can observe in Srimad Bhagavatam. Both the speakers and the hearers just don't go about as a matter of fact speaking or asking things. Rather, they actually glorify, express gratitude, appreciation of both the person speaking as well as the topics about whom which is spoken about. They glorify Krishna Katha, they glorify Krishna, they sometimes glorify the people in the conversation that they are going to speak about, or they just glorify either the speaker glorifies the audience or the audience glorify or appreciate or show gratitude to the speaker. So in this way here Maitreya Rishi, being the speaker, is so pleased by the attitude of Vidura. His questions, he was completely pleased by his association. So he is showing his gratitude by appreciating that how your inquiries are glorious, they are amazing because they are about Krishna and they make me remember Krishna. So you are merciful to me and you are merciful to people in general for asking about Krishna. So in this way he glorifies those questions and he says, you are glorious because it's obvious you are born of Vyasadeva, because he is remembering his friend Maitreya Rishi's closest friend is Vyasadeva, and here is the son of Vyasadeva, so naturally he has to remember that connection. So he says, you are glorious because you are born of Vyasadeva, and you're not just any normal person. You in your previous life is also Yamaraj. Due to the curse of Mandavya Muni, you have come here as Vidura. You are an associate of the Supreme Lord, and to that extent, you are so close to the Supreme Lord. Because understand, Maitreya Rishi was not that close of an associate to the Supreme Lord. So, even though Maitreya Rishi is elder in age and in knowledge and in ashram. He is a sage. Vidura was a householder. Still, he could see how Krishna intimately related to Uddhava in his presence. Even though he was also there, the most interaction and reciprocation between Krishna and Uddhava happened between Krishna and Uddhava than Krishna and Maitreya. The intimacy was more for Uddhava, and Maitreya now can appreciate how Vidura was also very involved, very intimately related and reciprocated with Krishna when he was there. And that is why Krishna remembered, while even leaving the world, Krishna remembered and told, Vidura will come to ask these topics. Please relate to him what I have spoke to you. So in this way, Maitreya Rishi says, you are an eternal associate. And to that extent, you are so close to Krishna, to that extent that Krishna, for your sake, left instructions with me before departing this world. So you see how even though Vidura did not directly ask what Krishna spoke, Maitreya Rishi naturally revealed that yes, I met Krishna and Krishna left some instructions for you. So I will tell you those things also. But now I'll begin answering your questions. So that is how he begins this process of creation. And the time is already 45. So let me do as much as justice to the process of creation. For those who have already attended the Canto 2, Chapter 5 session, which I had presented multiple times, this is very similar, pretty much the same, I would say. And this is Canto 3, Chapter 5, and that was Canto 2 and Chapter 5. So we will try to go in principle this process of creation. And we'll take if there are any questions now before beginning the process of creation.
Prabhuji, Hare Krishna. This is Rathayatra Das here, Prabhuji. Can you hear me?
Yes, Prabhu. Prabhu, please tell me.
So, I have a quick question, not related to what you are talking, but practically, Prabhuji. So, what message I am getting is when we go to holy places, we have to invariably sit with some great souls and saints in those holy places and listen whatever spiritual topics, Bhagavatam and all this from them. So question is, unless we go in yatra with Maharaj or other devotees, so basically my case, when I go, I visit the temple, meet some devotees, but there is no way to know whom to meet and who can discuss these topics with us. Is there any way to find out or something when we go to holy places? How do we locate those sincere souls so that we can learn something? We have time, so we can sit with them, but we don't know. We go get a guide, then just see around. So how do we solve that problem? Unless we are going in yatra, sometimes it is possible, sometimes it may not be. So if you can help.
There are thank you for the question, Prabhu. When I hear your question, two things comes to my mind. One is, yes, if you're going to holy places, generally for Gaudiya Vaishnavas, the holy places are like Vrindavan, Mayapur, Jagannath Puri, or Dwarka, so like these. So most of these places, Srila Prabhupada has already established centers and facilities, and even great souls reside there, and we can surely take guidance of various devotees who live in the town who can show us around. And there are quite a lot of senior devotees who live in these dams and around these dams who can guide. For sure, that is one way. And in general, if the main purpose is to hear, we can appreciate how much actually Srila Prabhupada has provided this opportunity to hear about Krishna in our daily lives even. We don't even need to go exclusively for a pilgrimage alone to hear about like the purpose of life or about Krishna. Krishna, by Srila Prabhupada's grace, how he has created a society, an association of devotees, where so much opportunity continuously to hear about Krishna in various ways, good or bad, we don't know. The technological advancement aids us, at least in that process, if we have the ability to use it in the right way. The technological advancement can give us unlimited opportunities to hear throughout the day as much as time we have, and in various forms, lectures, podcasts, bhajans, kirtan, seminars, all kinds of things. There's like all great souls, like so many of these advanced devotees, like they put out their videos, they create online content these days. Every one of them, they upload their uh, lectures that they are giving. So even if we are not able to personally be present in that place, still through technology we can hear. Even if you consider that as like little impersonal, it's not personally accountable, then still we have a local small association of devotees with whom we actually get together, and in a mood of taking shelter, we discuss about Krishna among devotees. It's not that always we need to, everything is required. One is we hear from senior devotees. At the same time, amongst ourselves, we discuss, we share, and we read and take it up as a sadhana to study with devotees on a personal basis, create friendship centered around studying Srila Prabhupada's books. So that would be very nourishing for devotees as a culture, to create friendship centered around studying Srila Prabhupada's books. So if you can find a friend with whom you can study, discuss, and include that and increase that circle, that is very nourishing. That itself is a great association. And in that association, sometimes you can invite other devotees, like how you are doing in your Cincinnati group. You have speakers from all over the world. Today, like last week, I think Vrindavan Prabhu was there before a few weeks. Brother Mohan Prabhu was there. Like Padmanayan Prabhu was there. So I keep hearing them. So like this, you are also providing this opportunity while living in wherever we are. So these are the two ways I could think. Do you think this answers your question, Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhuji. So yeah, we have to do little bit more. And you answered in the beginning also, Prabhuji, that when we go, we meet with devotees. So what is lacking with me when I go for very short time as if with a schedule. So like while you were talking, it came to my mind about Maharaj, and a person who really goes with the intention to meet some real soul, means sincere soul, he will definitely find him. And the Maharaj was searching, wow, whom he has not met, like Maitreya also, Vidura also. He has gone with real intention to spend time. Probably, yes, we have to find the people there. And other than that, as you said, wherever we are, we can meet together and discuss. Thank you, Prabhuji. So yeah, something is lacking with me. So that's what, I get confused with a very short time, run around, attend the program, other things. So that they will not happen. Krishna is very intelligent with he sees what is their intention. So if we are really searching, as you were talking in the beginning, we will get it. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you. So let's quickly see this process of creation. So in the beginning, when just there is, for our understanding's sake, Srimad Bhagavatam, here Maitreya Rishi and the Acharyas are presenting a situation, a scenario, which is not very which is not really kind of that is not the case, because everything is eternal. But still, for our own understanding, a scenario is presented where there is spiritual existence and there is no material existence, which is generally not the case because generally there is always the material existence on one corner of the spiritual existence. So in that, there is a river Viraja which divides the spiritual and the material world, and on that river, uh, the expansion of Mahanarayan and Mahavaikuntha Loka, that is Mahavishnu. He expands and lies down as Shiro Karanodaka Shai Vishnu, causal ocean. Viraja is called as causal ocean. So Karanodaka, the waters of the causal ocean. One who lies down on the waters of the causal ocean is called as Karanodaka Shai Vishnu. He expands from the Mahanarayan, and he is considered a Lord's Swamsha incarnation. So when he lies down and from his bodily pores, there are, or from his breathing or from his bodily pores, various universes actually start coming. The material universes begin to come, and that particular universes which come out of uh, the body of Mahavishnu or Shirodak Karanodakshai Vishnu is called as, at this stage, called as Pradhan, because it is a undifferentiated Avyakta Prakriti. Pradhan is generally referred as Avyakta Prakriti. Avyakta means unmanifested, unactivated, non-differentiated, inactive material nature. Why it is inactive? Because the three modes, Sattva, Rajas and Tamoguna, all the three are inactive. That is why the material nature in an equilibrium state. There is no action in an unmixed state. So this is called as Pradhan. So for this Pradhan to become activated, so this is Pradhan is actually the material nature. So if that needs to get activated, that is possible only by the intervention of the Supreme Lord. But the Supreme Lord does not interact with the material creation directly. So all that he does is he looks at the material nature. He glances at the material nature. That glance is so potent. The glance of Mahavishnu has Kala, which is the element of time, and the living entities with along with their actions and reactions called as karma, and swabhava, which means their inclinations, their impressions, vasanas that they have accrued from the previous birth. All those things along with that, the jivas are also inserted. So now into the material nature enters time and enters jiva along with their karma and swabhava. So now after that happens, with the flow of time, with the effect of time, the pradhan, once the time is activated, then the three modes also become activated. So in the course of time, first the sattva becomes predominant, because now the material creation is just in the beginning stage, especially for this particular universe. So then the Mahattattva, it becomes the Pradhan becomes Mahattattva when the Sattva Gun is predominant. So that is when the material nature is called as Mahattattva, when the predominance is mode of goodness. Then with the force of time, the Rajogunda, passion, the mode of passion becomes predominant. At that time, the material nature is called as Sutra Tattva, because the mode of passion is predominant. That's why the name is called as Sutra Tattva. And in the course of time, the mode of ignorance becomes predominant. So it is called as Ahankar, or predominantly in the mode of Tamogun. So it is called as Ahankar. So this is different from the individual false ego that we have, which is also called Ahankar. This Ahankar is the name for the overall material nature when it is in the mode of ignorance. And from this Ahankar, which is predominantly in the mode of ignorance, this material nature called as Ahankar, which still has little bit of passion, little bit of goodness, and a lot of ignorance. Because in this world, there is no one mode which can be just 100%. There is always a mixture. So in this material nature, at this stage of ahankar, there is some very little goodness, very little passion, and a lot of ignorance. So from this goodness, which is still there, comes actually Adhidhaiva or the doership, Karta, the Jnana Shakti, because we all know Jnana or knowledge is part of the goodness. So the goodness gives the Jnana Shakti. Passion means doing something. So the doing is the cause of creating something. The doer is the cause of creating something. So that Kriya Shakti, to do something, the energy to do something, that is called as Kriya Shakti. That comes from mode of passion. And ignorance is Dravya Shakti. Okay, you want to do something. You need things. You need uh, some ingredients. So those ingredients in this material world, which are made up of matter, are predominantly or in the mode of ignorance, or they are produced from the mode of ignorance. So there are three Shaktis. One is called as Jnana Shakti, one is called as Kriya Shakti, and the other is called as Dravya Shakti. So Karta, Karana, and Karya. So the person who is doing, and the thing, the cause, the desire, and the effect. All those things are also falling under this. And also you can say that from goodness comes Aditaiva, from passion comes Adhyatma, and from ignorance comes Adibhuta. So Adidaiva comes from goodness, Adhyatma is from as mode of passion, and ignorance is Adibhuta. So from this Adidaiva Shakti comes mind. You may say, oh, mind is generally considered passionate or higher. Intelligence is considered higher than mind. So intelligence should be coming from goodness, mind should be coming from passion. But the acharyas explain that mind is generally in the mode of goodness when it is in the purified stage. When it is contaminated, that is when it becomes, uh, it overpowers the intelligence. Otherwise, the intelligence is the thing which plans to get things done, because this is Kriya Shakti. Whether I have to do a good thing or a bad thing in this world, I need to apply my intelligence to plan. So it's up to us to use our intelligence either to uplift our lives or to degrade our lives. So that is why here intelligence is considered as something which is coming from passion. And then from ignorance comes the five elements and their subtle elements. So we will see what are those. We will see what are those five subtle and gross elements. So it is here mentioned very clearly from the body uh, of the Supreme Lord comes the aspect of sound. So it is said, Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur like gives a lot of explanations how the sound is coming from directly from the Supreme Lord, which is the first being. So from this sound, which is originating from the Supreme Lord, comes ether, which is the space, which is generally sky, but space. And the only quality of the space is the sound. And when the sky mixes with touch, it produces air. And air contains both sound and touch. And from air comes form. When it mixes with form, it gives fire. And fire has all these three qualities of sound, touch, and form. And next, the fourth gross element that will be created is by the combination of fire and taste. When these already three existing subtle qualities mix with the fourth subtle quality of taste, then the fourth gross element is manifested, which is water. And when the four other gross subtle elements mix with the fifth subtle element, which is smell, produces the earth, which contains the quality of smell, taste, form, touch, and as well as sound. So in this way, everything begins with sound. That's why the Vedanta Sutra says Anavriti Shabda, means the material existence begins with sound. The creation begins with sound because that sound comes from the Supreme Himself. And all the other elements, the material creation is manifested from sound. That is why it is said, if we want to unwind that material creation, then that process also begins with sound. Hearing about Krishna, hearing Krishna's holy names, that sound purifies the material contamination. So the material bondage, which began with sound, could be terminated by taking the spiritual sound. So that is how it is presented in the Vedanta Sutra. And now that all these gross and subtle elements are created, there are other senses which are created. The other senses, they are like, if you see, the individual bodies are not yet created. It's the individual minds are not created. The individual intelligence are not created. These are the collective sensory abilities. So the other senses are also created. These are personifications of that. The devatas, who are personifications of those particular senses, are also created. So ear, eye, skin, nose, tongue, hands, feet, voice, anus, and genitals. And the corresponding devatas like Dik devatas, Surya, Vayu, Ashwini Kumaras, Varuna, Indra, Upendra, Agni, Mitra, and Prajapati, corresponding to those senses, all of them are created. So now Mahavishnu looked at Pradhan, and then it became Mahatattva because his glance impregnated the Pradhan with time and living entities. So now the time is active, mode of goodness comes into act, becomes predominant first, then it is called Mahat Tattva, then it becomes Sutra Tattva with passion, and finally Ahankar, and the whole material existence manifests from the material nature, which is in the mode of ignorance, Ahankar. That's why we say Om Adhyana Timirandasya. I'm born of ignorance, because the whole material creation actually begins from the state of ignorance, the material nature which is in the state of ignorance. So now the devatas are all there, and these controlling deities, Vishnu Chakravarti very clearly writes, they assume forms, even though the forms are not created by Krishna's uh, ability, like by Krishna's sanction, by his causeless will, they actually assume forms because they are not able to do anything. All these elements are created, but they are just lying. They don't have any, they're not interacting with each other, anything. They're just not able to do any service because they can't come together. So they all come together and pray to Krishna because they were unable to perform their universal duties. So that is what we will see from the verses 39 to 51, where they actually glorify the Supreme Lord's lotus feet as the umbrella which protects them from material miseries, which gives full knowledge, and the Supreme Lord is the one who vanquishes sinful reactions, and the Supreme Lord is the one who reveals knowledge and gives detachment, and he also awards remembrance and courage. So in this way he actually helps. Excuse me, I just have to address once more. So the demigods are now the elemental demigods are now praying So they say they glorify the shelter of the Supreme Lord, and then they show how who's qualified and who's unqualified. They say one who's offensive, one who's engrossed in materialistic activities, and they are not qualified. Even though the shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord is available, those people who are engrossed in materialistic activities, they actually don't qualify. Whereas pure devotees or devotees who understand that the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord is their only shelter, they are the qualified candidates for the shelter of the Lord's lotus feet. And simply by drinking the nectar of Krishna Katha and earnestly performing devotional service, one attains knowledge. So Panena Tedeva Katha Sudhaya Pravriddha Bhaktya Vishadashatyaye Vairagya Saram Pratilabhya Bodham Yatanja Sanvir Akunta Dishnu. So they say how they are they can actually achieve the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord. And in this way, they offer various prayers for requesting for enlightenment and directions. And that's where this chapter actually comes to a close with their prayers. So they are requesting for Lord's intervention so that they can perform their service. They can come together and make the universe and become something useful in His service. So that is where this chapter ends. So if anybody has any questions, we can take that.
There are different material universes which comes from the pose of Mahavishnu and from his breath.
Okay.
So this process of creation which you're talking, is it same for all those material universes, or we are just for the sake of understanding, we have picked one universe and this is how the creation happens for any universe?
Okay. Yes, as you're saying, this is the prototype that is given for one universe. This is how it happens for every universe.
Okay. And Prabhu,
So,
the slide which you're on, it says prayers of the demigods. But I think you already clarified. So these are not the demigods because Brahmaji is not yet born. These are just the sense,
yeah,
elemental
elemental
demigods.
demigods.
Okay.
In one sense, they are the personified forms of those elements or the senses.
Okay,
What
Prabhu.
we will later be seen created by Brahmaji is those who are the aspects of Adidaiva who control our sensory activities.
Okay.
So that and like Vishnu Chakra Thakur very clearly writes for clarifying this, that how they have assumed, these elemental forms have assumed form by the grace of Krishna because they couldn't do anything. So by his empowerment, they achieved the form so that they can desperately pray to Krishna and then so that they can do their service.
Okay, Prabhu. Understood.
Haribol Gaur Sharanji.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
I thought you'd mentioned earlier how sound is the initiating energy,
Yes, Prabhu.
and I'm wondering, is there any more specifics around what that sound is and how the Lord puts that out into start this cycle for the senses and the elements?
Exactly in this particular chapter, Vishnu Chakra Thakur in his commentary mentions some details about how that particular, like how the Lord actually creates or that sound, where does it come from, what is the origination of sound. So he also gives some Vedic references for that. So let me just pull it out because I was studying but I don't remember the things, verses just straight out of my head. So this is around the verses 3.5.22 to 25, 33, like that. So they're exactly speaking. From verse 32, it kind of starts speaking about these elements. So say there for the verse 32, 3.5.32, Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur says, sense objects such as sound, from which arose ether, which is come, is a form of the Supreme Lord. Because he says, since it reveals the Lord through the sound describing his qualities. Or he says the other meaning is from sound, which is a form of the Lord itself. He says the Lord itself assumes the form of a sound, and from that came the ether. Because the logic is ultimately everything comes from Krishna. So for the material creation, especially the elements, if they are the very basic uh, building blocks of this material creation, and from them everything else will be created, then the only source for that also can be only Krishna. So in general, the sound, which is not material or spiritual, you can say in general, just the sound, which itself is a form of Lord, because that's why he's saying Tamaso Bhuta Sukshmadi. So if you see the verse, the Sanskrit verse, which says Atmanau, means his own personal form. And Vishnu
Mm.
Chakravarti says, being an effect of the Lord, or being something which is produced straight from the Lord, that is why sound is called Atma. And he says, Vedic reference, he says, Tasmat va etasmat Atmanau akasho sambhutah. So the ether arose from the Lord, who pervades sound. So this is a verse from Taittiriya Upanishad. So where it clearly says the ether, which is the first gross element, is arose from the Lord who pervades the sound. So that means the sound is a form of the Lord.
Thank you. It's also said that the Bhagavatam is the sound incarnation of the Lord.
Sound incarnation of the Supreme Lord. So that is why then Vyasadeva writes Anavriti Shabda. So the bondage also happens through the sound, that putting the soul into the material cage also happens from the sound, and it can only be broken back and given up through the process of spiritual sound, taking to Krishna's sound.
Nice. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining.
Yeah.
Hare Krishna, Gashwan Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Mother Tina.
Referring to your last slide, I just had a question. We understand that, for example, the senses, there's, apologies for the background noise. For
I'll
example,
share my
the ear.
screen. Just a moment. Yeah, go ahead.
So, for example, there's a relationship among the sense organ, the sense itself, and the sense devata. So, for
Yes.
example, the ear you must have the ear itself, then the hearing, and then the devata that actually governs that. However, we do hear, for example, that there are miracles in one sense, that there are people who have lost the eye itself, but they can actually still see through the eye socket. So the organ, the sense organ is actually gone. Now, when is it the sense devata then that blesses that without the sense organ that they can still see, and then somehow they are bypassing the law or the architect of Krishna, that it has to be some relationship among the three? Or is it that Krishna is stepping in and actually breaking this natural, I don't say law, but his design? Because in one sense, you need all three in order to execute, I guess, the sense. But we do see that there are times where the sense organs are not there and the sense is actually still there. Is that the Devata doing so or Krishna doing so? And is it breaking I guess, surpassing some sort of law or art design that Krishna has created?
To some extent, this particular arrangement is a kind of a, I would say, in one sense, a material arrangement, because the devatas do their job. We have the subtle sense organs, and then we have a gross sense organ. Specifically, those people, it is scientifically also many times observed that, say, some people had their hands earlier, or they were able to see, but due to some accident, they lost that external apparatus But the internal ability, because say for example, how do we dream? While in the night when we are sleeping, when almost all our senses are in a like a kind of a state which is, I would say, in a kind of an dispensed state, like they are not active, our senses are not active, our eyes are actually not seeing. But in our own dreams we see, right? We see things, we see people, and we can clearly imagine, visualize, and even do things within the dream. So that is because the internal sense organ, subtle sense organ is working. So specifically, it is scientifically also observed, and His Grace Dhruta Karma Prabhu, he writes about this in his book Human Devolution. There is a whole section he writes about that, how the uh, creation, when he writes about the process of creation, he writes in that section. I would say it is more of a material arrangement. So even if one of those is missing, at least whatever the other two they can do, they still keep doing. And in that way, Krishna's intervention with these things is pretty much, he has already arranged how it should work. He has created a system, and then he is aloof. Depending on our personal karma, then the rest of the things play out. And if depending on our karma, then we are not supposed to have a particular sense ability, then that is withdrawn, or it is given, or it is partially given. So this is all based on one's karma, and it works like an equation. The sense devatas do their job, provided our karma is there to enjoy that particular sense ability. So
Thank you. Can you
did I answer your question?
um sorry, it's still a little unclear, but essentially then technically these three relationships don't have to actually all exist for the execution of, for example, the senses. Is that correct then? Is essentially what you're saying?
No, I'm saying, if say for example partial execution of that ability, partial ability can be had even if one of them is missing. Not the devatas. If the devatas don't give us the ability, then we will not be able to surely see. But what I was saying, if the physical gross sense organ sometime may be missing, but the internal subtle sense organ can be still be active.
Thank you. And then essentially the devatas know our karma in one sense to give it
Yes,
or not.
they only work based on whatever is their karmic reaction allowing.
I see. So one cannot say, "Oh, it is God's doing that I'm able to see without my physical eyes." It is you say it's organized by karma that, in one sense, they lost their the organ of the eyes, but the karma has allowed them to still see, and the devatas are still executing that, and Krishna himself is not having a hand in that.
Yes, yes. He has
Thank you.
already, like how you have a president who has already set up a jail system, who has already put up the police department, and he has delegated that whole department to some other minister, like that. So it's not the president is personally involved in uh, arresting you or charging you or incriminating you. No, there is a whole system set up already.
Thank you so much, Hare Krishna.
Thank you all. If there are no questions, we can stop at this point.